What is up, Earth's mightiest subscribers? It's Blerd without fear. Welcome back to the channel. In today's video, we are going to be talking about X-Men 92, House of 92 #1 by Steve Fox and Salva Espin. And in this video, I'm going to explain how the X-Men of the 1992 animated series created House of X 30 years early. We're gonna talk about all that and more right now, but first, if you wanna see more awesome videos like this one, hit that subscribe button. I post multiple videos throughout the week, plus live stream the Blerd Cave every Saturday at 1 p.m. Eastern, 10 a.m. Pacific. So hit that bell button, that way you don't miss anything. With that out of the way, let's talk about X-Men 92, House of 92, #1.
You can't see me, you Stevie, wondering how I reach more evolutions than Evie and make it look easy.
Okay, so to talk about this, here's the groundwork that we kind of gotta lay. For those who don't know, this comic is based on the original 1990s era X-Men animated series. You know, the one everybody loves, with a theme song that is literally unskippable on Disney Plus. And I'm gonna tell you right now, if you skip that theme song, you are not a real X-Men fan, just putting that out there. But point of the matter is, this is a story that is that era of X-Men, but with the House of X remix. Now, I've done countless videos about House of X. I'm not gonna really go too deep into how and why that works. I have plenty of videos that'll completely break all that down for you in way better detail. However, what I will say is, for those unfamiliar with House of X, it's a storyline where Charles Xavier, Magneto, and Moira McTaggart, going by the name Moira X, by this particular point in time, these three individuals have come together to create the perfect mutant utopia that's not named Utopia. They've taken the mutant island Krakoa and turned it into a home and safe haven for all mutant kind. They have created Krakoan medicines that are able to help extend human life, cure human ailments, and all sorts of other crazy things. They've also created the Krakoan gates like we see on the cover of this comic that allow them to teleport anywhere in the universe as long as there's a gate on the other side, and this is all thanks to a flower. They've created their own language, and they have become recognized by the UN as a sovereign nation in good standing. Not only that, further down the road, they also wind up creating their own mutant planet by way of terraforming Mars. The X-Men 90s animated series predates us by a clear 30 some odd years. However, what if the X-Men animated series just did it? What if they did it early? What would be different? What would change? Well, apparently a lot. Now, granted, I'm gonna be honest with you, they do hit a lot of the same beats in this first issue because this is House of X. It's just House of 92 instead because of the year it takes place. And I'm gonna go to limb and say that this very likely ignores the 5th season of X-Men the Animated Series, which is considered to be one of the worst seasons of any animated series committed to television, but that's neither here nor there. I get a sneaky suspicion it ignores that. What it does not ignore is a lot of the beats that we saw in, like, say, I don't know, House of X #4 and 5. We see a version of the suicide mission to Orchis Base, only at this point it's not called Orchis Base, and Orchis has yet to be officially created exactly up to this point. Instead of having a mother mold, it's just master mold sitting atop what was the Mother Mold base in House of X. The X-Men valiantly try to stop the Mother Mold base from unleashing an army of Sentinels that would wipe out all of mutant kind, and God only knows what else Bolivar Trask has up his sleeve. Unfortunately, they fail in this, and Bolivar Trask, because Wolverine talks too much and gets too into his, wanting to kill people, but, it being the animated series, he couldn't actually stab anybody. Yeah, that whole thing. He gets too much into pontificating about what he's going to do to Bolivar Trask. Bolivar Trask is actually able to replicate his good works and his documents and every stitch of evidence about what he's done. He can replicate it somewhere else so that his work can carry on even once he's killed. We'll get more into that here in a minute, but the point of the matter is, just like how the X-Men went on a suicide mission in House of X #4 and 5 and died and were resurrected, all of this is replicated here, and it's revealed not only have they replicated the Krakoan embassies, they've come up with their own X-Force, CIA task force type deal, kind of similar to what we have in Krakoa as is, but instead of Beast being at the helm, it seems Cable is at the helm of this. And yes, Dazzler is constantly performing concerts for all of the mutants on Krakoa, just like she does, in the comics, post House of X. One thing that is definitely different is what's galvanized all this: an attack on the X Mansion by a gang of Sentinels, and they pretty much wiped out tons of mutants. This is very reminiscent of the mutant massacre that we saw in New X-Men under Grant Morrison, however, with a twist. Whereas in the X-Men animated series, the death that galvanized the X-Men into going against the Sentinels and pretty much ruined the childhoods of just about every X-Men fan at the time was the death of Morph. It was a way of the X-Men showrunners letting us know that, yeah, anybody can catch it, even though technically Morph was a character that nobody really should have cared about. They gave us just enough of him to endear him to us, to make him care that he died, even though he wasn't Wolverine or Gambit or Rogue or any of the other X-Men we would have gave a shit about. What they've done, though, is they killed another X-Man, and that is Jubilee. Jubilee has been murdered. She was killed during the attack, and due to the nature of how all of this came to be, they weren't creating mutant backups of all the mutants at the time as they were in House of X. How in House of X, it was revealed that Xavier had worked with Forge to remix Cerebro so that they could keep making mutant backups, so that way anyone who ever died, they could bring back. They didn't really have that luxury in this story. This all just kind of happened, and then they started making backups after that huge mutant attack. So anyone who died prior to that attack or during that attack is permanently dead, and this is what has spurned the mutants into creating Krakoa and to ensure that this never happens again. Now, we'll talk a little bit more about Jubilee here in just a moment, because you're probably wondering, man, Jubilee, she's the one that got them going? Okay, cool. Don't worry, we'll get back to that. Another thing that's been remixed in this is the Five. The Five is largely changed from what we're used to seeing in House of X, whereas in the House of X story, the Five are the mutants who are responsible for resurrecting all the mutants, with the characters Goldballs, who basically creates the eggs that the mutants are born from, Tempest using her temporal powers to age the DNA within those eggs to become the body that it's ultimately meant to become, Elixir giving those bodies life, Proteus comes into play mostly just to make the eggs actually viable as a way to give life in the first place, and Hope using her ability to sync with other mutants' powers, using that as the link that brings all their powers together, allowing resurrection. Well, that has all been changed here. In this instance, Proteus is still a part of the Five, where he basically replaces Egg. He is the one who actually creates the eggs and makes them viable at the same time, whereas Tempo takes on the role of Tempest, aging the DNA within those eggs to whatever the appropriate age for that character should be. Healer basically comes in and takes over the role of Elixir, with Fabian Cortez coming into the mix to boost every mutant's ability while doing this operation so that it's 100%, or maybe even you would say 200% effective, and then with Karma telepathically transferring the backup of whatever mutant is being resurrected into their body, not Professor X. It's all pretty interesting stuff, and of course when we're introduced to the Five, same as before, we're introduced to them while they're resurrecting the X-Men who died in that suicide attack. But the thing that I think is gonna throw a lot of people for a loop is, okay, well, what's up with Mora in this particular instance? It's gotta be, Xavier, Magneto, and Mora who are the ones who are calling the whole shots here, that are basically the reason why this whole Krakoa experiment exists. It's actually not the case. It is Xavier and Magneto, but the other mutant in question isn't Mora, it's Jubilee. Jubilee has been in hiding. Her death was faked during the attack with the Sentinels. They kept Jubilee alive and used her as the poster child to push the X-Men to do what is necessary to make Krakoa happen. Not only that, she does have the same abilities that she normally had in the comics and the X-Men animated series, being able to create plasmoids that on the animated series largely didn't really do a whole heap of a lot, but in the comics grew to become something incredibly powerful, but they added a little wrinkle into it. She does actually seem to have Mora's ability to reboot the timeline whenever she dies. And in this case, the thing that has been constant is not just the emergence of Nimrod as it was in House of X that was the determining factor of when mutants would be eradicated, but in this case, it's just simply the creation of Orchis, which is what happened when Bolivar Trask pressed that button and Wolverine took too long to kill him. Bolivar Trask was able to transfer not only the data, but even a virtual backup of his essence, thus Orcus has been created, albeit this time it's Orcus with not a Director Devo or a Aelia Gregor or a Nimrod or Erasmus or anybody else. No Dr. Stasis, no Fei Long. All of this takes place well before that. But what we do have is a Henry Peter Gyrick, who has long been a thorn in the sides of the X-Men. We also have Lady Deathstrike. We also have Donald Pierce, and we have Bolivar Trask, who has now gotten an Arnim Zola upgrade, having placed his body within a vaguely human-sized Sentinel. But the thing is, all of this could come crashing down because Wolverine, having that nose of his, he ends up following Magneto and Xavier when they're going to go check in with Jubilee, and he smells something that doesn't seem quite right. Wolverine is probably the one who was hit the hardest by Jubilee's death. Of course, we see characters like Rogue and Storm and Cyclops. All of them are sad that she is passed, but Wolverine is clearly the one who's hurting the most from this. So it would definitely throw him as being odd that he can smell Jubilee, especially an alive Jubilee, when he knows she's not alive. Now, he doesn't 100% know what is going on here, but what Jubilee can tell Xavier and Magneto is that they're screwed now because the thing that wasn't supposed to happen happened, and, well, we'll just have to wait and see how that plays out. Now, as for how the X-Men animated series works with House of X, it works about as well as one would expect. I mean, yeah, we've seen all this before, so it's not that huge of a stretch. It is interesting to see the X-Men in an era that's largely considered to be probably the best the X-Men had been up to that point. We're seeing them with that, with this new era that is also now kind of considered to be the best the X-Men have been up to this point. Everything else is largely the same. The mutants no longer have heroes and villains. Everybody is on the same page. They have the same laws, albeit they've worded them in very different ways. But yeah, I like it so far. Now, I am curious to see how different Orcus is going to be in their approach, and I'm curious to see what villains are going to, Quotey Fingers villains are going to feature in this, beyond what we've seen up to this point. We've seen characters like Sabretooth who's kind of hanging out in the background, not in the hole as he was in House of X. So it's going to be cool to see how that plays out. But yeah, it definitely is interesting. I like that Jubilee is the one who is the, the third figure in the trinity of X that is House of X, but it is kind of jarring at the same time, but it's not a choice I personally would have made, so I'm willing to give it the benefit of the doubt, see where it goes from there, and hopefully it turns out to be good. It is interesting to see Jubilee in this position where we normally would have seen more. Now the question is whether or not Jubilee will have any villainous tendencies as Mora ultimately wound up having, but I don't think we're going to end up getting into that. But I will say this, if this is successful, I would like to see how they would do with, I don't know, some of the more recent stuff, maybe have the X-Men 92 series adapt some of the other stories that have come up with, House of X since then, like, maybe do a better version of 10 of Swords. It wouldn't be that hard. Maybe do Inferno. Maybe do a 10 Lives and 10 Deaths of Wolverine. Or maybe, if they do it that way, maybe it'll be 92 Swords. Maybe it'll be 92 Lives and Deaths of Wolverine. I don't know, maybe that might be a bit much. But anyways, let me know what you thought about X-Men 92, House of 92, #1. Keep it plus ultra and sound off in the comments.